Following the descent of South Sudan into violence triggered by an attack on South Sudan People's Defense Force base in Nasir on 4 March 2025, the revitalized Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, overseeing the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan, observed that the agreement is facing the most serious challenges since its signing in September 2018.
Establishment of subsidiary electoral management bodies at state level, the establishment of procedures of the voter registry and registration, and support the civic education and voter outreach.
Almost 14 years after the world welcomed the world's newest nation in July 2011, after decades of struggle, South Sudan remains haunted by cycles of violence and humanitarian crisis. With a fragile peace under the revitalized peace agreement, under an escalating fire of fighting, any remaining hope of ending the cycle of conflict is now in grave peril. This is Amani Africa Dispatch, our videocast on current political, governance, and peace and security affairs of continental and multilateral policy importance. South Sudan's story is not of one war, but of many unfinished transitions. Barely 2 years after independence, the country plunged into civil war in December 2013, driven by a power struggle between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. Despite the signing of a peace agreement in 2015, it did not last even for a year when the country plunged into war in July 2016. The renewed civil war lasted until the signing of the revitalized agreement in September 2018. The 2018 revitalized agreement was supposed to mark a turning point. It promised power sharing, security reforms, and a path to elections. Yet, with the reforms stalled and little progress made in implementing key elements of the peace agreement under the weight of weak, unaccountable, and unstable leadership, the end of the transition and the timeline for holding elections were postponed twice.
The parties have embarked on steps that to me and many of my fellow citizens appear to be only drops in the ocean. I am deeply concerned by the unacceptable slow pace of implementation and the lack of political will shown by the parties as my people continue to suffer on a daily basis.
In the most recent case, the signatories to the peace agreement extended the transitional period by an additional 2 years in September 2024, pushing the long-anticipated first elections to December 2026. Yet, this extension came without a credible strategy for implementing the outstanding transitional tasks within the new timeline.
Sudan's transitional period was extended until February 2027, pushing back the timetable for elections to December 2026. This was inevitable but a regrettable development given the deep frustrations and fatigue felt by the South Sudanese people at the apparent political paralysis and inaction of their leaders to implement the peace agreement and deliver the long-awaited democratic transition.
South Sudan was already under huge strain following the loss of 2/3 of its revenue due to the damage that the war in Sudan caused to the oil pipeline. With mutual confidence between the leaders of the signatories of the 2018 peace agreement broken down, reforms stalled, and local conflicts proliferating, and over 9 million people, nearly 3/4 of the country's population, in need of humanitarian assistance, the country's peace was too fragile to withstand any major violent incident. The country's fragile peace suffered another serious blow in March 2025 when violent clashes erupted in Nasir County, Upper Nile State. The South Sudan People's Defense Force and the Nuer community's White Army, linked to Machar, exchanged heavy fire. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. A UN peacekeeper was killed. Then, on 4 March, the White Army overtook the South Sudan People's Defense Force base. the government hit back with force by launching attacks. Additionally, it detained 22 senior figures from the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and opposition, including General Gabriel Diop-Lam, the Deputy Chief of Defense Forces. Security forces surrounded the residence of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and opposition leader Riek Machar and placed him under house arrest on 26 March.
Dr. Riek Machar is under house arrest.
Tensions also escalated further when Uganda's military chief confirmed that Ugandan troops had been deployed to Juba at the request of the South Sudanese government. In response, the SPLM announced it was suspending its participation in critical peace implementation bodies, citing rising violence, political intimidation, and the presence of foreign troops as serious breaches of the peace deal. The opposition further stated Machar's arrest ended the peace deal. As South Sudan teeters at a dangerous crossroads where mounting humanitarian pressures, renewed armed clashes, political arrests, and economic collapse intersect, the urgency for meaningful, coordinated international and regional action cannot be overstated. With the war in Sudan still raging on with no end on sight, the descent of South Sudan back to violent conflict threatening to tear the 2018 peace agreement represents a formidable challenge for the region's and African Union's preventive diplomacy and peacemaking norms and processes. The diplomatic efforts taken thus far, including the IGAD summit outcome, the 2 meetings the Peace and Security Council held on the situation, the African Union Commission's chairperson call with President Kiir and his statement on the situation, and the deployment of the African Union's preventive diplomacy outfit, the Panel of the Wise, signify a high level of mobilization to arrest the downward spiral. Yet, fighting did not cease. Requests for engaging Machar were rebuffed, and the fissures in the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, the signatory to the 2018 peace agreement, are worsening, accelerating the unraveling of the agreement. This means that the ability of the AU, the regional body IGAD, and other international actors to elevate their engagement and take further urgent, high-level, concerted, and sustained preventive action could determine whether South Sudan steps forward into peace or backward into another cycle of war. The stakes for South Sudan are high, and the clock is ticking.